very dear friend of mine. He was twice World Barista Championship finalist. He was once Latte Art, World Latte Art Championship finalist. He's from UK, but he's been living in New Zealand for a while now. My good friend, John Burr!
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
How's it going, my friend? Good?
Good. Yeah, very good, very good.
How's been doing the quarantine?
Good. I've basically been living in here, and yeah, kind of lucky to have a whole bunch of gear around me so I can continue working. And yeah,
Nice.
I've been very lucky, fortunate.
That's pretty cool. Not a lot of people know you like I do. So explain a little bit, how did you start in coffee and what are you doing nowadays?
I started in coffee it's about 15 years ago. Actually, when I really got into it, it was in a cafe in Melbourne. So I was very fortunate enough to kind of leave behind a previous life of working nights and things like that. And started as a barista in Melbourne, and yeah, was really fortunate to be kind of thrown in the deep end in a really kind of good environment in terms of quality and things like that, and was exposed very early on to some interesting coffees through a place which I think most people would know, which would be St. Ali in Melbourne, when Mark Dundon first opened in Melbourne. So that was kind of a good inspiration for me to want to pursue coffee. Yeah, and then moved to London, where it all really took off after that. So, and then nowadays, no, I was born in Melbourne.
You were born in Melbourne?
Yeah, born in Melbourne. Grew up. No, I grew up for a little bit in Victoria in Australia, and then family moved to the Gold Coast in Queensland, and then in my mid-20s was when I moved to London. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how long have you been living in New Zealand now?
Now since I think it was August or September 2014.
Oh, it's been a while.
So it's been a good stint. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Tell it a little bit about Gorilla Gear.
Gorilla Gear. So Gorilla Gear was something that I kind of thought there was before I started Gorilla Gear, I was kind of working a lot of grinder bits and pieces and grinding discs and understanding a bit more about, or trying to understand a bit more about grinding coffee. And I thought it was quite an interesting avenue to go down, because I thought at that time, and potentially still nowadays, I think we are putting so much emphasis on the espresso machine and or filter coffee machines or brewers and things like that, and I just didn't think we were putting enough emphasis on grinding, full stop, whether it's grinders or burrs or anything like that. And I was very fortunate to be exposed to a lot of those things, where I started to develop an understanding of grinding coffee. So I saw a bit of a gap for some specialty long life grinding discs, and decided to continue up with that, and just released a few sets of burrs for a few grinders, and have just slowly been kind of ticking away at it, and slowly progressing and trying to continue that kind of evolution and understanding of how we grind coffee, and whether or not we're doing the right thing. So,
besides the EK43, which other grinders are you producing Gorilla Burrs?
So I have burrs for the Mythos one, and also the Rover conical 71 millimeter set for single phase, I know they do fit in the cold as well, and then also a couple of other other manufacturer grinders aside from Mazza. And I've been working away slowly at some burrs for the Anthem as well, which should come out later this year. And just kind of at the moment, actually, I've been working on new versions of those. So the first lot of the new versions came in a little while ago for the EK. So going through a lot of testing at the moment. Just trying to constantly improve. I don't want to stay the same with a set of burrs. As coffee evolves, I want the burrs to evolve with coffee as well.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because, as you said, I see a lot of evolution and improvement around espresso machines. But I think the grinders are, I think that there are two things. Grinders and roasting machines are a little bit behind the espresso machine technology, for example. And I think it's pretty cool what you're doing, like the angle that you're aiming for this.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because when I first started, I guess, trying to understand or work on grinders more, it took me a while to really understand that it wasn't as much about the machine as it was about the burrs. And when I started to discover that there was, I feel like the weight is heavier on the burrs than the grinding machine. That really kind of threw a bit of a spanner in the works because I had a certain understanding at that point. And then when I had access to a grinder that I didn't particularly like, and it was very inconsistent and all over the show and that sort of stuff, and then went and put a very different set of burrs in it, it changed my perception of what the possibilities are, and how you can have, you can have it two ways. You can have a really shitty grinder and a great set of burrs, and that will make all the difference. Or you can have the best grinder in the entire universe or a shitty set of burrs, and it's not really going to matter how good that grinder mechanically is if the burrs are just not really kind of fitting bill. So it's a kind of difficult scenario to fit in. And then, further down the rabbit hole, then really discovered that, one particle, we've obsessed over particle distribution and things like that over the last wee while. And the most interesting discovery for me was that one particle distribution or one particle makeup doesn't suit every single coffee or every single style of brewing. So when you think of that, and you're trying to get the best out of your coffee, and obviously roast style as well, is really going to affect that. So it's a fine line between trying to find a balance between a grinder that can produce the best it possibly can for every single coffee, or a grinder that enables you to, I guess, explore coffees a little bit further. So
I normally do an exercise with people that I put like the espresso machine. I set up like a pre-dose everything, and then I set up 5 different grinders or more sometimes for the same brew ratio and same time. So they're brewing at the same time, all these different grinders in the same recipe, and it tastes completely different. And that's when people start to pay attention in why a grinder is important for coffee. It's not a matter like which one is better, but how different they can be, even that they're supposed to be the same since they're like in the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, like I always like, you always put this very, and give it a lot of emphasis on this, and also the distribution part. I always say to my friends, like, try the same coffee, tapping once, tapping twice, no tapping, and doing different techniques of distribution, and you're going to taste completely different beverages. But you need to pay attention to the grind size, and you need to pay attention how you're going to do the distribution of particles there. Otherwise, you're going to have a different experience every time.
Yeah. And I think we're starting to get into the realm of really kind of understanding a bit more of what happens in in the basket or in our, filter brewers and things like that, of how we settle coffee, or even diving further into, paper filters or obviously baskets and things like that, and how our grind, is affected.
So you've learned a lot from competitions, right?
Yeah, a massive.
How many times have you competed?
So first was 2009. So I did 2009 UK barista. Horrible experience.
Why is that? Tell me.
I'm always, and still to this day, terrified of standing up in front of a group of people or having a crowd, right? So even now it still terrifies me. So when I first did that, it was a scary experience. I was well out of my comfort zone and it was a horrible experience, but then I wanted to turn that into a positive because I learned so much out of it, and kept on pushing myself every year. So that's when I did the UK Latte Art and was very fortunate to win that and do quite well in the Worlds. And off the back of that, it really gave me that drive to want to do better in competition. So then I did 2010, 2011. I judged and coached in 2012.
Oh, really? Judged locally in UK?
Yeah. So I was judging Sang Ho at the time, who was one of our roasters at Square Mile.
Sensory or tech?
Oh, sorry. Coached. So no, when I judged, I actually judged in Ireland in the end.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Tech
it was kind of interesting. Sensory. I'm too slow for tech. No, sensory, but I did it once to get an understanding of what it was like and to on the other side of the table and to develop a bit of that empathy for judges. And it was a great experience, and I didn't kind of pursue that any further, only because I didn't think that I was competent enough to be able to give the barista on the other side of the table the best of me. I think those that do sensory judging really well, it's a difficult task, and I know that it's not something that I can do. So, and I felt that I had learned what I needed to learn to be a better barista on the other side of the table. So,
cool.
it was 2013. 2014 I competed again, then it was a big jump, and then I moved to New Zealand, and then obviously 2018 and this year. Well,
yeah, so
eventually.
you competed for 2 different countries already.
Yeah, so the UK and New Zealand. Yeah. And I can actually compete for Australia if I wanted, or Italy.
Exactly. Are you going to compete again this year?
Yep, so I've been prepping for 2020. We were meant to have our nationals a couple of weeks ago. Obviously been postponed till September. And when you talk about like learning things and what competition has done for people, this was a huge learning curve for me this year. When I started prep last year, there were certain things that I wanted to put into play to alleviate a bit of stress and to also kind of take out a lot of guesswork. And
I know you sent a questionnaire for a few people.
Sorry?
You sent a questionnaire for a few people, not questionnaire, but like a very important question.
Yeah, so for me, I was curious last year about what people what their view is and how they see or perceive what specialty coffee is. And because I know that I've been, really evaluating what my perception is or what my understanding is, or what my beliefs are. I started questioning my beliefs around specialty coffee, and so I started prepping very differently this year, and it actually enabled me to hit pause when I needed to. When everything got postponed, I was very fortunate enough to literally clean up back here, press pause, and not have to stress about anything. I've got all of my coffee, my green coffee, frozen down in a massive freezer just here. And they're all frozen down in individual batches. And I'd done that originally to be able to control my roasting, no matter if I was, roasting last year or this year, because I go straight from the freezer into the roaster. And that way it kind of eliminates any of the external environmental changes, and obviously stops the aging of the green. So that was the best preparation for me, to be able to do all of that. And also freezing my roaster down as well means that I haven't wasted anything. Any of my test roasts that I have, they're all frozen down. My green's all frozen down. And I'm not going to have to worry about my green aging.
I don't think everybody has this the setup that you have, and the lucky that you have to do it everything, or even know how to do it. And so probably a lot of people were caught on surprise and like, what I'm going to do with this coffee now.
Yeah, it's something I probably should have done a video or something a while back, when all of this kind of happened. But I know there's a lot of people out there that were probably gearing up, and had special coffees obviously flown in and things like that, and now they have to kind of either look for new coffees or kind of understand, okay, what is it that I can do to be able to salvage, potentially a lot of money.
Yeah, I hope a lot of people watch this and see what you've been doing, and they can have an idea how they can move things forward.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm more than happy to answer questions about what I've done this year for my preparation that has been very different, but enabled me to be able to hit that pause button and not stress about a single thing. I think there's definitely ways that we can preserve a lot of the hard work that's already been done.
Yeah, talking about this, that was a question that I prepared for you, and I think you already touched a little bit on this, but let's dig deep. And how expensive is to compete?
I'm a firm believer in competition can be as expensive as you want it to be.
Yes.
Or as cheap as you want it to be. When I think about all of my years of competition and the amount of money that I put in myself, it's kind of a little bit terrifying. It's actually quite a lot terrifying, but it's that kind of sacrifice that you're willing to make, right? And I remember when I first started, I wasn't necessarily earning a ton of money. I was fortunate to have access to certain resources for certain things, and then over the years, you build up. You get certain cups or certain jugs and all those all the little bits and pieces, and you learn where to cut corners to save money and things like that. So I'm definitely a firm believer in it's up to you how expensive you believe it should be.
But even in the low cost kind of presentation, is still you're gonna put some money to make your presentation, especially for the worlds, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest expense for most people is going to most likely be coffee, and whether that's green coffee or whether that's having to buy that from buy the roasted coffee from your supplier if you're not working for a coffee roastery or things like that. That can potentially be the the biggest cost. And also depends on what your roaster is able to do in terms of batch sizing for test roasting and things like that for you to make sure you're minimizing your wastage. So it just depends on how smart you can be with your scheduling of training and testing coffees and again, that's where the freezing comes into it.
Do you think that this amount of money that people put on competition is pushing away producing country baristas or baristas from countries that don't have a lot of money further away from the top positions in WBC?
I think there's probably a big percentage of that perception that is causing people to kind of maybe retract from competition. I don't believe it should, because I think with the right idea and the right mentality and the right concept and voice, I don't believe, it should matter, how pretty the table setup is and things like that. Obviously,
but as you said, the coffee is one of the most expensive things, and it's very hard. Like, let's say I was going to compete from Brazil, and I'm going to use a Brazilian coffee. It's very hard for me to pay as much as American or a European or Australian will pay for the coffee, because they're going to pay, first of all, they're going to pay in their currency, which is way stronger than the local currency. And I'm not going to be able to match their prices to compete with that particular coffee. And I think that happens everywhere.
But in the same sense, I've always been a firm believer in any barista, any good barista, a competitive barista, or any barista full stop, even at a shop, should be able to grab just about any coffee and be able to communicate that coffee in the best way possible. And when you look at the rules of competition and really kind of dive into it, my understanding anyway is you should be able to take just about any coffee to competition, and as long as you follow the rules and explain that coffee in the best way possible and prepare that coffee to the best that it can possibly be, it should still do well. And I think 2017 was proof of that. When you look at what Dale Harris did on the world stage, not only did I see a very different human being that I'd seen in the last decade, but he did it with a coffee that that coffee didn't even make it didn't even pass the COE national jury that year.
Yeah, it was definitely the low, like if it's a cupping table, probably was one of the lowest scores from finals, and definitely the cheapest. That's what I know. Like per pound from the finals.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example.
But it's not for, like, again, it was a coffee that had like a good balance of sweet, acidity, and bitterness. Like I can't bring like just like a fine cup and it's just going to be bitter and slightly sweet and win this. It needs to be a good coffee, for sure.
Definitely, but I think in specialty coffee, we've gone into this realm of the way I see it is what is good. What do we, and that was my question to people last year, is not just what is our understanding of specialty coffee, but to me, what I believe specialty coffee tastes like, and to someone on the other side of the world, that specialty coffee might not, in their world, taste like their version of specialty. And I've seen this in COE before, where you're doing, you've got the whole jury kind of looking at everything after a round, and you see such a split when everyone's looking at the scores. And I remember for me, there were a few people that I was aligned with on certain coffees, and then there were other people that were complete opposites. So, what is good? What is good specialty coffee? How I still think on the scoring platform for not just for grading coffee, but also WBC, there's still a huge subjective section of that we can't escape. So as much as we try and be objective in competition, there is still going to be our perception, our kind of unconscious learned bias through experience of what we believe is good. And that's kind of a tricky realm to get into, I think, of having a definitive good coffee across the board for every human being. It's just not, I don't believe it's possible to do.
I don't think this exists, period. I don't think that everyone will think the same coffee is the best coffee, period. That's why we don't have like a contest called the best coffee in the world.
Well, we could start one.
Yeah, we
see what happens.
So one of the points of competition is create a thing called signature beverage,
The fun
right?
part.
Fun part. Is it fun for you? Is it hard? Is it easy?
I guess it depends on the angle that you're coming from and how you started to develop your routine.
Mm.
So for me,
For you.
when you're starting to develop a routine, right, you're either looking at concept or coffee first. I've done it both ways many times. And I think depending on for me, for this one, for example, for this year, I had concept first. Coffee just fell into place. I was very lucky. And then I had an idea of how I want to present that signature drink. And then it was just about kind of trying to find a relevant way to be able to produce that signature drink that had or has synergy with the routine and what I'm trying to communicate. So that's been very different to in previous years where, obviously you're trying to make something tasty and very tasty.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you ever made something that it wasn't tasty at all?
that's like always the first few months of signature drink building, right?
No,
Is
but you never presented something that you later thought, yeah, that wasn't good. Like,
oh yeah, my very first one, UKBC 2009. I can't remember what else. It was something along the lines of mascarpone and a gooseberry, and it was gross, man. Kind of curdled a little bit, probably looked really disgusting as well. And it was from that point where I was like, I'm never making a signature drink again unless it is super tasty. So I think from that point on, all of my signature drinks just started to become quite interesting and
I think
yeah.
it's fun, and I think we should talk a little bit more about it because I was talking to Lem, and he said that just being a coach and being backstage, he already tasted some terrible sig baths. And as a judge, I need to say that unfortunately, most of the drinks that I have are terrible.
Yeah.
I can't say like it's not even like 50-50. Probably like 10% of them are good.
Yeah, it's difficult to add things to coffee and have it make some sort of sense or have relevance to what you're trying to push. 2018 was an interesting one for me because what I had originally wanted to present was a completely clear signature drink. So,
Yeah,
um,
about it.
sorry.
I think you mentioned to me something about it, like to be like completely clear like water.
Yeah. So, and I ended up kind of developing a little percentage of the drink was that with the distilling of the espresso. But yeah, the original idea, and it worked to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Was to distill the whole, so all the ingredients and everything, and coffee and everything, distill the whole lot, and what would come out would be, or was, a completely clear liquid. And I managed to make it taste nice, but when you're drinking a clear liquid and you have this idea in your head that it's meant to be coffee, it didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was so far removed from coffee that it was too much of a risk to kind of go to stage with that. And have
We need to think about like lately we are seeing a little bit more about the neuroscience of coffee and how our brain reacts before we drink. So yeah, it must be weird. Like the only thing that I can relate it was when I once ate a banana that tastes like apple, my brain just blow. I was like, what?
Yep.
So it's maybe the same thing.
Definitely. And it's all of the research that I had done for my 2013 routine was based on our sensory perception. And back then I really started to understand how we can influence that perception. And so when you see something, when you visualize something, and you already have an expectation of what that is meant to represent, or when you hear something, when you hear words, when you have that that experience, that kind of cataloged experience in your head of what that should represent. And if it doesn't represent that, then generally it's kind of perceived negatively, which can be quite tricky. So again, going back to the clear signature drink, I think even if it had tasted the best in the entire world, pushing that in front of a judge and going, here's something that doesn't look like what it's going to taste like, very kind of tricky situation. So yeah, we are influenced way too easy on what we can actually taste. So
okay, time for our game. Now I'm gonna do two options. You're gonna have to choose between the two, but the other thing that you're not gonna choose, you can never ever have any more in your entire life. Are you ready?
Okay.
Let's start easy. Coffee or beer?
Coffee.
You give up beer? Nice.
Yeah, 100%.
Music or movies?
Oh. Music.
You give up movies?
Yeah, music brings me too much joy.
Okay. Barista competitions or the NBA?
Oh, 20 years ago, I would have said NBA, 100%.
I know.
I went to my first NBA game last year, and I was blown away. So
I knew. I saw it. I saw it on Instagram. You were in Boston, right?
In Boston, the most emotional thing ever for me.
One of those two is going to cease to exist as soon as I cross it.
It would have to be barista competition. It's got me where I am today. So
nice, good save. Australia or New Zealand?
Hey, right now, New Zealand.
So
great Prime Minister who's doing an amazing job.
She's
keeping everyone safe. So
big fan. Can we trade presidents, please? No? Okay.
Sure.
Bogota barista party or having the WBC in your hometown?
Bogota.
If you guys don't know what we're talking about, it's the best party ever. And I doubt it that one day we're gonna be able to top that. I don't think.
Never,
so.
ever.
Never, ever. I still have pictures that are we cannot be published. Otherwise, I'm gonna get.
I have a whole bunch of those too. Yeah.
But the memory is still fresh, even though we got pretty much wasted. It was one of the best nights of my life.
Yeah, the most surreal experience I've ever had, and we'll never forget it.
No, that was amazing. And I tell people, they're like, why? I was like, can't tell you. That
had to be there.
Had to be there. So, last but not least, your favorite coffee. Only one for the past 12 months. What is the best coffee?
Past 12 months.
12 months, yeah. I'm going to give you a year. So what was the best cup that you had it in this year? Doesn't matter if it was in competition, if it was not in competition, coffee shop, you roasted, someone else roasted. I don't care.
And doesn't matter what style, espresso or filter?
No, it doesn't matter the style. Something that is just ink it in your mind.
I think currently, and because I've been playing with them for probably 5-6 months now, is one of my competition coffees. Just because it shouldn't be what it is, and through a lot of hard work, it is, and I think that's a very promising thing for the industry going forward in the future.
Can you tell a little bit what is this coffee or no?
Not so much yet. I think we'll wait for competition for that. But it's just The country?
Yeah.
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Which most people will guess what it is from that. So,
Oh, damn.
but you know, for me anyway, it's not just the best coffee. There's more elements to what makes the best coffee for me. Yeah, and this is a big part of that. So
perfect. Well, my friend, thank you very much. I'm gonna leave. So if you guys want to follow John, his Instagram is johngordon09. Is the same for Twitter as well?
Twitter, yes. Not that I've been on Twitter in a long time.
You can find him on Facebook as well. He's always answered. At least he answered me, but I guess it's because we're friends. But like, follow what this guy is doing. It's been amazing. Don't forget to share, and if you want to subscribe. John, thank you very much, and I hope we can have more of this kind of conversations in the future. And I hope that I can see you soon, at least in November. I hope everything's fine. At least go to Melbourne and we see each other in November.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It'd be good to physically see everyone again one day.
Stay safe, my friend. Take care.
You too, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.